Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A live stream today. I'm Mario Blandini at IX, and I'm very happy to be here today following a recent announcement we made regarding globally distributed storage 2 weeks ago. So thanks a lot for joining, folks. Joining our discussion today, we're super happy to have Ben Golub, who's CEO of Storj. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing great, and I'm just like you, super excited about the announcement and super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Also joining the discussion is TrueNAS legend. Everybody knows him, Chris Moore, our Senior Vice President of Engineering here at IX. How you doing today, Chris?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Anytime we can get together and talk about TrueNAS and technology, you know I'm in. So looking forward to this.
So let's get started. For folks on the live stream, if you want to ask a question, find and click the Say Something toward the bottom of the screen you have and begin typing, then click the send icon. While we compile those questions, I'll start with a few. And we'll start with you, Ben. For those who don't know Storj, who the heck are you?
Well, we are the pioneers in globally distributed storage, and we're a group of 70 people spread all around the world. We're globally distributed, just like the storage, and I think our belief is probably pretty similar to yours, that things are better when you've got lots of eyes on them, and when you're not dependent on any single person or piece of equipment or data center to run well. We try and say, there's strength in numbers, and that's kind of underlies everything that we do.
Awesome. So I know that this space, at least people tell me it's, quote, crowded software that does this sort of stuff. And there's tons of choices. And we at IX, we agree with you, Ben. We see Storj as a great fit for TrueNAS users. So Chris, what has your team excited about working on Web3 storage and collaborating with Storj, or StorJ, however we end up pronouncing it, as a part of the services available on TrueNAS?
So a lot of reasons, but really, the distributed nature of it just super appeals to us. TrueNAS, as you know, is the world's most installed software-defined storage. We're very proudly open source, and this makes it really attractive to go look at a solution like Storj, especially with our technical crowd mindset. But users being able to back up data to a globally distributed storage provider, which could be made up of other users renting out space, even on their own TrueNAS systems, that really fits well with like our own core ethos. That's what we want to do even internally. So picking Storj specifically to do this was an easy choice. They just had some awesome features, the ability to directly access the distributed network, but S3 public gateways. You guys have done a lot of really cool and neat stuff that just made it a super simple choice for us to do a drop-in replacement, especially when using S3 type backups. And then lastly, being able to act as a CDN as well in some capacity is pretty stinking cool. And we hope to see more TrueNAS users using that in the future.
Yeah, that's great. Right. No, we love having a sort of a nice range of solutions for customers that go from everything that they need to have for on-premises storage to global backup. And as I was kind of indicating, the way we do storage, data isn't stored in any one place. It's sort of like RAID 80, right? The data is encrypted, it's redundantly sharded, and then spread across a global network of tens of thousands of nodes that are all independently operated in different data centers or home systems. And that just does amazing things for price, does amazing things for performance, for security, for durability. And of course, we like to say it's like you're getting CDN performance for cold storage pricing, and it works really well in conjunction with a great on-premises solution as well.
Well, if I could riff off that for a second too, one of the things to toot you guys' horn a little bit, you've done very well is you make it brain dead simple. Because there's a lot of solutions out there. Mario, you mentioned the crowded space. There's a lot of technically neat solutions, but you got to have a PhD in data management to figure out how to do it safely and how to use it. And can I get my data back? How do I store it? It gets very complicated very quickly, but you guys really have done the homework and the work required to make this just a drop-in replacement for somebody who's already backing up to S3 and doesn't necessarily have time to get into the details of where my bits happen to be at any particular moment.
Yeah, well, I think actually we were inspired a lot by what you've been doing, right? We want to make it easy. We want to make it compatible. It's we've got an S3 app. You change 2 lines, and it's pointing towards our storage. We're open source, just like you, because we believe that's the best way to provide great security and just make it easy for people to use it, to integrate, you name it.
Hey, Ben, I got a follow-up question for you. Buzzword bingo. I think everybody knows what cloud object storage is, whether it be AWS, Google, or Azure. But is Web3 storage different than that? It obviously can do the same things, but what distinguishes Web3 storage?
Yeah, what we sort of think of as Web3, and like all buzzwords, right? It gets totally extended and used But the way that we do storage, we are not in a position, and nobody's in a position to compromise your data or cause it to be lost, right? So that there's not the way that we do things. There's no single entity that controls all the data, that controls all of the nodes. You're not dependent on any power supply or geographic event, right? So the way that we do the storage, you could have storms take out the entire east coast of the U.S., or global events take out everything in Eastern Europe, or have people make mistakes, and it doesn't matter, right? Because there's simply no individual, including ourselves, who can mess up your storage, and that to us is the true ethos of Web3. That you're not placing your trust in any individual or any piece of equipment or any location.
Great. Well, hey, Chris, let's do a little bit of a sanity check on marketing messaging from a technical perspective. We describe GDS as operating just like an S3 compatible storage, but it's multi-region by default, has some security advantages, is faster, and 1/5 the cost, 80% less, or you get 5 times the storage for the same price. Yeah. Does this match reality in terms of how IX Storj, the solution, is integrated on TrueNAS?
Oh, absolutely. And not only does it match it, it's matching it now today. Users can already go and grab the latest versions of TrueNAS Scale, both Angelfish and our Bluefin beta release. And users on TrueNAS Core can grab this functionality coming here in the next few weeks with 13.0-U3. And it absolutely does those things. We've been using it internally here. I've been happily testing alongside with my team now for quite a few months, and it performs as advertised, it works as advertised, and it was almost too easy. It was like, oh, I expected to have to do more to get this spun up, but no, you just pointed at a different S3 target and away you go.
2 lines of code, like Ben said.
Yeah, no, it's really quite brilliant.
Awesome. Hey, well, anyone out there on the live stream, please start throwing your questions in there so we can stump our experts and get you information that you're interested in. Ben, I know that you mentioned you could rent out some space. So there's really, just from a technical perspective, 2 ways you could operate: as a client or as a storage node. Describe that a little bit so people can understand both, because some people may do one or the other or both.
Right. Yeah. Well, as you probably know, something like 90% of the drives in the world are less than 20% full. And you can fill up that, it takes no extra people, equipment, even electricity to run those drives at 80% full. And so what we let our storage node operators do is rent out their space. So we compensate you fairly for both bandwidth and for storage. And so if you are if you are using TrueNAS and you want to rent out some spare space, that's fantastic. If you are a person who wants to use cloud backup, you can do that, and you can do both or just one, and it's just fine. And the nice thing is that we've done a really great integration between our products so that people can do either really, really well.
Anything to add from a technical perspective, Chris?
Yeah, no, both these functionalities are available in TrueNAS today. For our scale users, of course, you can host and become a storage node, which is pretty stinking awesome. Again, I do that myself and have had a lot of fun running those. And rent out that unused space. And really, when you pair it with ZFS on the TrueNAS side, so you got all your data integrity, checksumming, it's real easy to build that node, because it takes time to build credibility on the network and get more storage placed on your system. So I think TrueNAS is a fantastic solution for people who want to work on that side. And then for acting as a client, again, that functionality's gone out so people can do cloud sync backups. And we're just kind of getting started. We already got a lot of stuff we're working on in the background for next generation editions of this to add more features and functionality to our storage backup solution. So you'll have to stay tuned. I'll be excited to talk about that in the coming months.
All right. So one thing before we get into the questions, I'm the marketing guy, Ben, and we see, like virtually every other layer of the data center stack, that open source, as it becomes mature, right, it presents a new choice to people, and just the nature of the world has it that once it's mature and robust and easy enough to use, folks start using it, and for a lot of different things. So we are saying that the open storage era is inevitable, even though storage being a technology, and I've been around in the market for a long time. We used to tell people overspend on your storage because it's so critical, it's a worthwhile investment. But this many years later, we see that folks are opening up their minds, pun intended, to at least trying out open source. So I know that you, not to talk about your past roles, but you've also been around open source for a while. What is your view on open source specific to storage? And is the open storage era upon us?
Yes, I think the open storage era is upon us, and I think there's sort of an inevitable trend. The moral arc of the universe points towards openness. The moral arc of the universe, I think, points towards things becoming more distributed over time. We are, of course, open source, and you really couldn't run a system like ours without being open source. People have to, what we're saying is don't trust us, don't trust any individual node. Instead, trust the code and of course, to trust the code, you have to be able to see and also trust that lots and lots of people all around the world are looking at it, making sure that it's secure, making sure that, again, as we use this, right, the data, any data that's uploaded to us is encrypted with keys that only the users have. It's then redundantly sharded using erasure coding, and is distributed to 80 or more different nodes. Nice thing about that, of course, is that you're not dependent on any node doing the right thing. No node has the ability to see the data or even reconstruct the data, right? But the way you build the trust in that, right, is by making sure that it's open. And so I think we're absolutely in the era of open storage. And as you note, right, we used to say, overspend on storage, but the amount of data in the world is growing 20-30% a year. It's going to fill a stack of CD-ROMs to the orbit of Mars and back if you wanted to do it this year.
Right.
And cloud storage prices haven't come down in 7 years, right? So that doesn't work unless you take a different model.
Very good. All right. Thanks a lot for that explanation. Hey, the first question from the audience has to do with if you're a storage node operator, what happens if your node happens to receive illegal information, something that's just like, what's the risk that someone has as a node operator not having control of what actually gets stored on their equipment?
That's a great question. So, what you receive as a node operator is an encrypted erasure code share, right? So it can't do anything. You have no idea what it is. We have no idea what it is. But if for example, we find out that somebody is hosting malware on our system, or illegal copyrighted content or whatever, we have the ability to delete it. And in which case, your share would get deleted just like any other share. But you won't know, and you don't have to take any legal liability. And this sort of happens. What you will see as a storage node operator is that pieces are put on your system, they're downloaded, some are deleted, right? And you don't have to worry about it. It all sort of happens in the background.
Very good. Thanks for that answer, Ben. For the question from the audience. Next question. Will we be able to join an exchange program? Maybe this is just an idea, Ben, about how the whole rent versus consume thing might work. I know a lot of our audience likes the idea that if they are, like you said, running at 20% utilization, they could pay for their offsite backup simply by offering some capacity, right? So the question is asked is, for example, 10 gig of space on the network, and do you get 1 gig of backup space for it? How does the exchange work?
Well, so we sort of keep these things sort of intentionally sort of parallel, so that you don't have to be a storage node operator to store your data, or vice versa, right? But yeah, if you look at the math, there's a set price to store on the network, and there's a set price to have stuff stored on your drive. And yeah, it would be a great use case, right, to be both, right? And then the amount that you receive for being a storage node operator can help subsidize the cost of your backup.
All right. Hey, Chris, from a technical perspective, how are you sure that the data is going to be there? I know this is a globally distributed and erasure coded all over the place, which by definition would allow if a node went offline. But the question is about if a node were to go offline, how do you make sure that the data is there? And I think it's just inherent in how it's the cluster is deployed.
Sure. Yeah, the way you guys do your erasure coding, I believe, and correct me if I have my technical details wrong, but you have 80 fragments, and I believe it was 29 or 31. It was required 29 to restore the actual data. And then in addition to that, if somebody hosting a node goes offline, there's repair operations that happen in the background to bring it back up to that 80 fragment level as necessary. So, And if you have
yeah,
other,
that's a great explanation. So, again, when you start out, your file is not only encrypted, but it's spread across 80 nodes into 80 different pieces, of which any 29 can put it back together. We keep track, of course, of how many pieces there are for every file that's with us. And so if it drops below some level, which is well in excess of 29, so I think it, if it drops down to something like 60, then we repair the file. And we've never lost a file since going into our first beta, whatever it is, 3.5 years ago, right? And that's just the nature of this thing, right? The chances that 51 independently operated drives on different power supplies and different geographies run by different people will somehow simultaneously fail is almost zero. Right? So.
Yeah, you're a lot more likely to have something wipe out a whole data center.
If we were to lose it, it would be something like an asteroid, and we'd have much bigger problems.
Yeah, I was gonna say at that point, you're not worried about restoring your data.
or a solar flare or something other big calamity that we'd cross our fingers.
Something like that. So, but even in that case, hopefully it's only one side of the one hemisphere.
Earth, yes, and with that distribution,
so the other would be protected.
So Ben, why don't I ask you this? One of the things that we describe GDS with is this idea that it's geographically distributed by default, which isn't the default for most cloud providers. You can, in some cases, pay more and pay a premium to get that. But talk about in the context that you spread it around there, what are the advantages of having it globally distributed? Why it almost seems like you'd want that if you could get that by default versus having the default choice being a region.
Right. So you obviously, the data, those 80 pieces are distributed globally, and we give people some ability to change the parameters of that if they don't want it, let's say, outside of the country. But default is globally distributed, and that's great. That's great for durability, as we talked about. It's also great for performance. And as you can imagine, if you're using us, let's say, to distribute video, those 29 pieces come from the fastest of the 80 nodes, wherever they happen to be. And if you're watching a video in Mumbai, you're going to get it from different nodes than if you're in Memphis, and that's just that's the great part of the globally distributed nature, and it happens by default.
Awesome. Well, the next question is about performance. How does it compare to S3? And one of at least the highest level, we say double. Maybe you can talk about how Storj is its cloud is put together to give you better performance. We already know that the bandwidth is a fraction of the price, but you get more bandwidth than the other guys.
It's massively parallel, as you can imagine, right? So again, you're serving the pieces that you want from the 29 fastest nodes. You can actually stream and scrub 4K video without a CDN, which is great. You can put a CDN in front if you really need screaming performance for your hottest of the hot files. But performance is very good for many use cases, especially involving large files and reads. It's far faster, and especially faster if you're considering things happening across region. Those of us who've been in the storage place know that everybody can tweak the test to make the performance look better for them. So, but we have lots of data on our site, and we can share performance tests that we do, and we compare.
Well, even better than that,
every hour. Yeah,
folks can go download it and try it for themselves, which is really cool.
That's even better, right? It's even better. But we, as I mentioned, we download every hour large files from ourselves, from Amazon, from Google, Azure, just to make sure that we're staying faster.
Yeah, when we were doing our early testing, one of my developers or directors is actually in Brazil. So I'm hosting files here in the US, he's downloading, we're testing, we're kind of shocked how fast that was. So, for both of us.
It's the nature of parallelism, right? It just makes things faster. I mean, you obviously, for certain use cases, you want to be right in the data center because the speed of light makes a difference, right? So, HPC type use cases, you probably want to have, be using TrueNAS in the data center. But then if you're distributing the data, right, this is a great way to get excellent performance around the world.
Very good. And just from a experience perspective, when people go to try it, Chris, it's built in, right? There's no need to go to the app catalog to download it, or
the only place you'd go to the app catalog is if you want to host a storage node, and you would set that up, and that runs as a container on scale, so that's its own little app. Very simple. And then if you want to act as a client and back up data to storage, that's right in the data protection section of the TrueNAS scale UIs today. Storj is the first provider that's going to be listed there. You pop in your account information, any keys you've created to access those buckets, and away you go. At that point, you can automate your tasks, and you can do push or pull jobs. You can be syncing from one TrueNAS and replicating it back down to another. You can get really creative. Our cloud sync technology is pretty flexible.
Awesome. Well, I'll take a crack at the next question, which is, how do I know if I need it? And at the highest level, our recommendation, certainly for anybody who's using TrueNAS today, is if you currently do not have multiple sites, 2 or 3, and you're looking to get access to that, this might be the easiest way to go about doing that that's out there. And typically, there are data protection use cases, or as we talked about, CDN. From a TrueNAS user point of view, Chris, is there anything beyond just wanting to have a second site that might be interesting from a use case perspective around data protection? Because you mentioned distribution and other things too.
Yeah, using as a CDN's one valid use case, of course, from TrueNAS, being able to publish content that you're sharing with friends and family, for example. Storj provides functionality to do that on their end as well. And then, like I said, multi-site operations, you hinted at that, make a lot of sense, where you're backing up from one location to another, and then maybe pulling out of the cloud at a periodic basis to another offsite location. And you can be moving things potentially between S3 providers as well, using our own tooling on TrueNAS. So it's going to be really flexible. And I'm always amazed when I hear what people are doing with it, because it's like, I would have not thought it to do it that way. But if that's your use case, great. We want to try and allow all things to be possible.
Oh yeah, well, it's, we just make the stuff and people figure out how to use it. Now that's the cool thing about open source, because we make it for one thing and people figure out how to use it for all sorts of stuff, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
The next question for you, Ben, it's one of those things, that the healthy tension between regulation and decentralization. So compliance and decentralization. Compliance almost hints that you have to put it in a very, very specific spot versus it being decentralized. You mentioned that you can have some ability to configure where the data goes and such. Talk a little bit about that just at a general level, because we have folks all over the world, and especially outside the United States, where the countries are small. It's hard to get geographically distributed while staying in country.
Right. So right now, we offer the ability to restrict your data to, to the U.S., to North America, or to the EU. But what we have been talking to people about for things like GDPR is that, again, since the data is encrypted, what tends to matter in most regulatory regimes is where the encryption keys are located, not where the encrypted bits of data are. Any more than when you're, as we're talking today, right? The data is going across large numbers of routers and bridges, and we don't know who runs them, and we don't care, right? And if we want it to be secure, we just encrypt it, right? And so, while obviously, it's important to stay on top of the regulatory regimes, we have SOC processes in place. And again, for most people, what they find is that what's really important is to be able to talk about the provenance and control of the encryption keys. And we, of course, plug into any encryption system that you have, and we never touch the keys.
And that's different from other cloud providers. Some of them offer that, but some of it's not even available, right?
Yeah, and some of them it's not available. Most, encryption is not there by default. In our case, encryption at rest is by default. And you don't depend on us to be providing the doing the right thing, right? And as I like to say, if I wanted to compromise a single file on Storj, if I was a bad person, I would first of all have to somehow find 29 nodes out of out of the whole universe. Each one would have to be compromised differently, because it's not as if you could just have one person giving up their password or misconfiguring things, right? And even then, you just get an encrypted blob, even if you manage to get those 29 pieces. And the next file is going to be on 29 different nodes, right? So it's like encrypted sand on encrypted beaches. It's actually far more secure. And of course, regulation takes a while to catch up. But I have no problem saying we're far more secure just by design.
And Chris, naturally, if you had the ability to spread your own TrueNAS nodes out, you don't need Storj to do that. There's lots of different ways you can geographically disperse things within certain things. So I think that with these new technologies coming on, Ben, it has folks thinking of different ways they can do it and how it ties to maybe the classic way of solving the problem. And now with these new techniques, it'll take regulation some time to catch up. Hey, Chris, on the topic of ransomware, certainly how you use something has a lot to do with the risk associated with ransomware. And in this specific case, I know that you could talk about best practices on TrueNAS, but if you extend that TrueNAS to copying things to an S3 bucket on Storj, how might you suggest that plays in the ransomware world? Because backup and ransomware and immutable and all that sort of other stuff plays in there. How would somebody go about using it in a ransomware positive way?
So as Ben kind of touched on in his previous answer, attacking the storage network directly would be very difficult. Finding all those nodes and managing to attack each file directly and encrypt them, next to impossible. So really, it's about your best practices from the TrueNAS side on how you protect your keys, how you store those, what kind of backup do you do? Do you do a write? Do you set up permissions where it's write only and write once, for example? No overwrite allowed. There's different ways you could set it up to protect yourself a little more from ransomware attacks. But then as a TrueNAS operator, if you're thinking from the sysadmin standpoint, running TrueNAS in your home or office, taking proper precautions to set up local snapshots as well, so you have that layer of defense on the local TrueNAS without even having to go restore something from the cloud. That's super important in any ransomware mitigation strategy. So with the two technologies, I believe you have all the tools in place to do it right and do it safely and follow best practices. But again, we'd recommend people always look at those and make sure they set up a playbook that fits their risk profile.
Hey, Ben, I assume that that while you can give customers lots of confidence, or even users of the free stuff, lots of confidence that their data will be available to restore, it probably is your last resort because you'd prefer to hydrate a snapshot or do something locally with a lot more performance to get the app back. But I assume you've had some customers who've had to do restores.
Absolutely.
That extra performance helps a lot, being able to suck data out of the cloud faster.
Your RTO and I mean, you want to have your time to restore is obviously really critical, right? And you don't want to, especially if there's a ransomware attack, say, oh, wait a minute, I have a 1 week old backup that happens to be on tape, in an archive somewhere. That's not what you want. And so I think, as Chris said, right, if you whether it's a ransomware attack or something else, right, having a good procedure that works out for having constant snapshots and backups with different access mechanisms so that one attack can't get at both. That's how you protect against ransomware. I should also mention that access control can also be decentralized, so that that is again one of the other ways that you really prevent against ransomware.
All right, hey Chris, if someone's using an S3 gate, well, I'll read the question as stated.
Yeah, good.
Will backup be shifted to use the Storj native client for local encrypt as opposed to relying on the S3 gateway, or allow choice between the two?
Yes, this is a good technical user who sent this in. I like these kind of questions. So the implementation that went out today and that you'll be getting on TrueNAS Core here soon is going to use the public S3 gateway. However, you still have the option to use local native encryption before even sending anything out over the wire to storage. That's a feature you can turn on in the Cloud Sync menus on TrueNAS today. But to your bigger question about allowing a choice between the two, down the road, we could potentially see offering a choice where you can choose S3 gateway or the local native client. If you're technically minded enough and you're already running TrueNAS Scale, you can technically do this today. Storj also provides a Docker image that allows you to spin up your own native client, if you will, and then access it over the S3 protocol on the local 127.0.0.1 type address directly on the TrueNAS. That was actually how we prototyped it early on, Ben, when we were doing testing.
Oh, that's great.
That works great. And you can host that as a container on your TrueNAS Scale box. That way, all your keys, everything encryption-wise is all right there on the TrueNAS side. And then you're not having to use the public S3 gateways. So
that's fantastic.
You really do have both options. Again, if you're technically savvy enough, you can configure it quite a few different ways.
Yeah, I think we just think the same way that you do. You want to have an easy button to help people get started, but you also want to be flexible for people who want to be use more advanced setups.
And our users always surprise us because they dig in and find like all these really technical solutions. So we try and just leave as many doors open as we can so people can do those kind of things. And again, we even tested it that way ourselves early on. And it worked great.
All right. One last question here from the audience. It's probably more of a request for content. specific to folks who are node operators today, how they might transition their Docker image that they're running today onto TrueNAS scale running Kubernetes. So the more around the specifics of what it would be to map storage mounts and properly host the system. So I know we're in the process of building a lot more content on this, Chris. Maybe you can give an update there.
Yeah, so this is definitely material we should be adding more to our guide for existing node operators who are used to running it via the Docker methods. If you already are running via Docker, it's really not that difficult to move it over to TrueNAS Scale's Kubernetes implementation. At the end of the day, it's running the same container in the background. TrueNAS Scale's Kubernetes is just going to give you some different UI options for mapping in your host volumes. If you set those the same as you did on your Docker deployment, it's just going to come right up. It's going to look functionally the same to the storage app running inside the container. So I believe you'll have your credentials directory usually. I think there was two, just off the top of my head. There was a credentials volume you have to mount in, and then the actual data volume where you want to store the bits. As long as you map those two the same way you did on the Docker side, it's going to fire right up on TrueNAS. But we'll take a look, see if we can get some more docs created to help make that a little easier for folks.
Yep, and a little plug for our docs. Anybody's allowed to collaborate with us online. That's one of the cool things about us being an open company is that we get a lot of these ideas, as you mentioned, Chris, from our community.
As we like to say, patch is welcome. Patch is always welcome.
Absolutely.
Hey, and if you want to be a doc scrubber, heck, you'll be a champion in the community too, because we need those too. So anyway, as we wrap up today's Q&A, Ben, for anybody wanting to learn more about Storj, what do you recommend?
Well, I mean, we have a ton of the normal things you might expect. We've got lots of documentation on our site, lots of documentation on your site, tons of resources available in the community. But honestly, I think the best way to learn about it is just get started, right? It's built in, as Chris mentioned, into both Angelfish and Bluefin. You get 150 gigabytes for free to play around with. So I'd say just dive in. It's surprisingly simple. And again, the both teams have worked so well to make it really seamless for people to use.
Awesome. And Chris, you mentioned folks can download Bluefin today, which came out 2 weeks ago, but then also Angelfish version 22.02.4 was just put live this week. So, and it's the default download. So if you want to download TrueNAS Scale and check it out, the Angelfish might be where you'd want to start. Is that what you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you're a little more adventurous and want to help us beta test the next big release in TrueNAS Scale. I mean, believe me, I want those people too. So please keep them coming. But if you're not quite as adventurous, definitely go grab TrueNAS Scale Angelfish. You can give this a shot. It's available right out of box today. And of course, documentation's all out there on the TrueNAS side. Storj has excellent documentation as well if you want to dig into the technical details on how their network works and what the S3 gateways are versus native client and all that good stuff. But as Mario, you mentioned, all of our docs are open source. So anything you see that could be clarified or improved, you can leave comments, you can submit pull requests. We are super happy to collaborate with anybody on that kind of material. And of course, our community. TrueNAS has a massive open source community. We have forums, we have Reddit, and I think all the cool kids hang out on Discord these days for some reason. So I've had to change my ways too, unfortunately. But Discord's a great place to go ask questions. I'm on there pretty often. A lot of us are happy to go and collaborate with people in our community who want to start playing around and have good questions.
Very good. Well, this has been a fun topic for us to talk about today as we bring this live stream to an end. I'd like to thank everybody who joined and for the questions you had. A special thanks, naturally, though, to our guest experts. Thanks a lot, Ben, for joining today.
No, thank you for having us, and thanks again for the collaboration. This is just an amazing partnership.
And as always, thank you, Chris, for your time and energy.
No problem. You know where to find me, Mario. Always happy to do these.
Indeed. As an open source company, folks, we at IX rely on referrals from those in our community, and we generally appreciate when you share your experiences with others that you know that also store data. We are the world's most deployed storage operating system. It's free. It's more mature than ever. And with cool new things like Storj, you can take advantage of the free 150 gig or very low cost to scale it out from there. So we always welcome everyone to the open storage era and to the idea of taking advantage of data freedom with TrueNAS. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on our next live Q&A livecast broad stream. I can't even talk. Q&A live stream. Thanks, everybody.